Hey, what is happening, you poorly calibrated cast form? Today, we're doing a tier list going over Pokemon TCG mechanics throughout the years. I'm not going to be able to give my full opinion on some of these cards because I started playing the game back in 2010, and a lot of cards came out before then that are in this tier list. So I'll give a rough breakdown of some of them, but the other ones I'll go a little bit more in depth with. But I have played like some old decks from some of those previous eras, so I'll have a little bit of an idea of kind of how I feel about those cards. Let's jump right into it at the top with the Crystal type Pokemon. I don't think I've ever played with a Crystal type Pokemon. I don't know how good these things were. I did do a little research on these before I made this video to see what the heck they were, because off the top of my head I had no idea what they were. And they were Pokemon that when you attach certain types of energy to them, they change their type according to the energy you attach to them. Or at least that's what I saw when I googled Crystal type Pokemon card. So that actually sounds pretty cool. I like the idea of that. I'm gonna go ahead and give that a B to start off with, and some of these I might adjust as I go throughout the tier list. Shining Pokemon, that's a D for me. I don't think there's any good Shining Pokemon. They just kind of existed. They were kind of like amazing rares, to be honest, and like initially they weren't very good or didn't really do anything. Break Pokemon, I'm a big fan of Break Pokemon. I love Break Pokemon. Kind of extended the evolution lines of some Pokemon, gave you a little bit more HP, and they gave you an extra attack or ability to work with. Now, the most known Break Pokemon is that Greninja Break, but Zoroark Break was my favorite Break Pokemon. There wasn't that many good ones, to be honest. The only ones I remember off the top of my head being good was Greninja and Zoroark. Oh, there was Trevenant Break as well. Probably actually the best, well, I don't know, Greninja was pretty good. The second best one overall was probably Trevenant Break. It did kind of was a terror in the expanded format when that was a thing. So Trevenant Break was a big card for sure. That's definitely the second most successful break. Greninja was probably the most successful break, Trevenant second, and then Zoroark was third. But past that, all the other breaks weren't very good. But it was a really cool mechanic in the game. I loved break Pokemon. I'm gonna give them the A tier. Prism Star Pokemon, Radiant Pokemon, Star Pokemon. I'm a huge fan of these one-of cards that you can only play a one-of in your deck. I'm a big fan of that existing in the Pokemon TCG. I'm glad they continuously bring it back. I loved Prism Star Pokemon. I love Radiant Pokemon. Never played with Star Pokemon, but it's basically the same thing, so I'm willing to go ahead and just throw the Star Pokemon up there in the A tier as well. And I think what can join them as well is the A-Spec cards. They were only trainer cards. There was no A-Spec Pokemon cards, but A-Specs were basically the same thing. You could only play one A-Spec in your deck, and you could only play one of it as well. So you couldn't play like 4 Computer Search. You could play the Computer Search, the Dowsing Machine, Scramble Switch, cards like that. Super powerful cards that could turn the tide of a match, you know, when you played them. So yeah, huge fan of A-Specs. Radiant Pokemon, Prism Star Pokemon, a little bit less powerful on the turn you use them, I feel like, overall, because you can kind of use them continuously throughout the game. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, love Radiant Pokemon, love Prism Star Pokemon, love A-Specs as well. Huge fan. Team Plasma Pokemon. So for stuff like Team Plasma Pokemon and I don't know, there's a couple more Rapid Strike, Fusion Strike. Oops, going a little bit too high for those. Single Strike. It's really just like a label that's given to certain cards, so that way they can then print other cards that interact with just those specific cards. So like something like Elsa Sparkle, which a lot of you are probably familiar with, searches for Fusion Strike energy and puts it on your Fusion Strike Pokemon. But it could have said searches for Fusion Strike energy and puts it on your Psychic Pokemon. But they wanted to limit what Elsa Sparkle could do just to Fusion Strike Pokemon. So they come up with these labels that they give cards, so that way those cards only interact with that type of card without like too broadly interacting with other cards. So it's not really like a super cool or fun or interesting mechanic. I guess if you like put all the Team Plasma stuff together, that's pretty cool. Same thing with like Rapid Strike or Fusion Strike or Single Strike. You put all the whole package together and it's kind of cool, but like really overall it's like a mechanic in the game of the Pokemon TCG. I'm not like a huge fan of those. Another thing that can join the D tier for sure is VMAX's 3 prize Pokemon that were very simple, not a whole ton going on, not a big fan of them. But some other 3 prize Pokemon that I actually am a fan of and a lot of people aren't is the Tag Team Pokemon. I actually really enjoyed Tag Team Pokemon. They were super powerful, but they were super diverse and had a lot of depth to what you could do with the card, I feel like, overall. Of course, Mew and Mewtwo Tag Team was probably the one that stands out the most as far as diversity goes, but even like the Pikarom, the Full Blitz, you had the Tag Bolt, you had a bunch of other Pokemon that you could work around with the Pikarom as well. A lot of people are not big fans of Tag Team. I actually really enjoyed Tag Teams. So I'm gonna put them up in A right now. I might bring the tag team. I might have to bring the tag teams down a little bit to B though. We'll see how we go through the rest of this tier list. 2 prize Pokemon, the Pokemon V, the Pokemon EX. They were like okay. Yeah, definitely not a D tier, but I don't think they're gonna get much. I don't think they get much better than a C. Now, other EX Pokemon that I will actually give up into the A tier is the old school EX Pokemon. I think it says 2003 to 2007. I didn't know the time frame, but I guess that was the time frame. These EX Pokemon were a lot cooler. They were still worth 2 prize cards, but they weren't as powerful they were like head and shoulders more powerful than the non-2 prize Pokemon, and they were a lot more in depth. The cards were a lot more in depth. They had a lot more going on. A lot more was going on in the decks for those cards as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and give the more old school EX Pokemon a little bit of a boost over the new age 2 prize Pokemon. And there is still the current EXs from the Heart Gold, Soul Silver era. Those are still out and about right now. They're still happening. We don't really know. I don't really know how those would land in a tier list like this. So gotta go ahead and like play with those cards a little bit more. Another set of 2 prize Pokemon, multi-prize Pokemon that I'm a big fan of was GX Pokemon. Once again, it felt like they were still 2 prize Pokemon, but the evolving from a single prize Pokemon like what we currently have with EXs or the old school EXs, and then also the depth on the cards, I was a big fan of that as well. So I was a big fan of GXs overall. I thought it also introduced the GX attack, which we now have as the V-Star power or ability throughout a game that you can have access to as well. So big fan of GXs. And I think they are a little bit above the V-Stars, but I'm still going to put V-Stars pretty high at the B tier here. V-Stars also pretty cool. The Dark Pokemon, once again, this is kind of just like a label that was given to some Pokemon. Same thing with Owner's Pokemon. Flare Tools, I don't know how many people actually know about Flare Tools. So Flare Tools, there was these 2 tool cards that they printed, Headringer and Jamming Net. I want to say is the other one. Headringer was definitely the more played of the 2. Neither were really played that much, but what was really cool about these cards is they were tool cards that you put on your opponent's Pokemon, and then they interacted with your opponent's Pokemon in certain ways. Like Headringer increased the cost of it had to be attached to EX Pokemon specifically, increased the attack cost of the EX Pokemon it was attached to by 1, and then Jamming Net reduces the damage that the Pokemon did by 20. And of course, these could only be attached to a Pokemon that didn't already have a tool card as well. So you could kind of counter it by putting a tool card on your EX Pokemon ahead of time, so your opponent couldn't put a Headringer or a Jamming Net. But you know what? We kind of always talk about the only card that has ever really existed in Pokemon that interacts with your opponent being Power Spray. But I guess Headringer and Jamming Net, even though you couldn't play them during your opponent's turn like Power Spray could, they were still pretty cool, to be honest. I was kind of a big fan of the Flare Tools. I think they should bring those back. Flare Tools were really cool. The more that I think about it, Flare Tools were really, really dope. And would definitely be a card I would like to see them bring back, and probably doesn't kind of break the rules of Pokemon as much as something like Power Spray did, which is a card that you could play during your opponent's turn to stop them from using their Pokemon powers. When they went to activate a Pokemon power, you could play Power Spray and it canceled out that Pokemon power. So it doesn't quite break the rules of the game the way that Pokemon generally functions like Power Spray did. But it is a card that interacts with your opponent's board state, whereas like you're putting a physical card on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So yeah, Flare Tools, I think I'm gonna give them an A. I think Flare Tools were really cool. They weren't very heavily played, didn't see them a whole ton, but they're pretty dope. Mega Pokemon, I had them pretty high here when I initially did this tier list on the stream, but I think I'm gonna bring them down a little bit. I had them an A. I think they're more of a B range card, maybe even C, to be honest. Mega Pokemon weren't really that cool. The one thing I liked about Mega Pokemon is you had to work a little bit harder to get them into play, but you definitely felt the power of them once they were set up. You had like Mega Ray was probably the most well-known Mega Pokemon. There's Mega Mewtwo. Mega Manectric was my most played of the Mega Pokemon, so I'm a big fan of the Mega Manectric. But you have to like attach your Mega Tool card to your base EX to evolve it, otherwise your turn would end when you went to evolve your Mega Pokemon. So you had to work a little bit harder, but the trade-off was they were like really powerful Pokemon once you got them set up. I'm gonna go with B. I'm gonna go with B on the Mega Pokemon. I really enjoyed the Mega Pokemon. SP Pokemon once again were cool, but it was just kind of a label given to Pokemon. That way, like certain cards could interact with SP Pokemon in certain ways. Like Power Spray, the card I was just talking about, you had to have 3 SP Pokemon in play in order to play Power Spray. There was SP Radar, which shuffled a card from your hand back into your deck, and you could search your deck for any SP Pokemon. So once again, this kind of still falls in line with the Single Strikes, the Team Plasmas, the Rapid Strikes, the Fusions. Feels just like a D. The one I do feel like Team Plasma and SP stand out a little bit above Rapid Strike, Fusion Strike, and Single Strike, just because there was a lot more going on with them, a lot more depth to the cards you had access to, and the way things kind of worked with each other. So I think I'm gonna give Team Plasma and SP a bump up here, up to C tier. It feels kind of bad to put them alongside EX and Vs. It makes you want to go a little bit higher, but overall, it was just kind of a label given to cards. Another card we can throw in there as well, I think, is Ultra Beast, but I think Ultra Beast I will actually put in the D tier. Arceus. Now, a lot of you are probably confused by this one. It just says Arceus. Back in the Diamond and Pearl era, I want to say, there was an Arceus card, or Arceus cards that were printed, and there was an Arceus rule that said you can play as many Arceus as you want in your deck. You weren't limited to just 4 Arceus. All of them had the name Arceus, but you could play as many as you wanted. The Arceus deck wasn't very good. It was okay. I'm going to go ahead and put those in D. And I think Amazing Rares can also join Arceus in D. Same with Light and Dark Pokemon. Not a huge, like, once again, just kind of a label given to them. Also, I'm going to throw Fossil Pokemon in there and Restored Pokemon because fossils are lame, bro. They haven't done anything with fossils in so long. I hate fossils. They're just boring. They're never good. Yeah, get out of here, fossils. Let's get our first S tier up in here, though. Ancient Trait. I love Ancient Traits. I talk about Ancient Traits all the time when we talk about Pokemon mechanics, things that I wish had existed in the game once they were introduced into the game, or had stayed around in the game once they were introduced to the game, is Ancient Traits. I loved Ancient Traits. I thought they were super cool. It's a kind of bonus effect. We have it currently kind of in the Pokemon TCG standard with Terra Pokemon. So Terra Pokemon say, when you have a Terra Pokemon on your bench, it can't be hit by damage from your opponent's Pokemon. And Ancient Traits are kind of like that, just an extra attribute or effect on the card outside of what would normally be considered an effect or an attribute. It's not an ability, it's not an attack. You know, it's like an extra thing. That's what Ancient Traits were. It was like an extra attribute to the card. And there was a bunch of different ones. There was one that said you could evolve on the first turn that your basic Pokemon was in play. The Articuno specifically that's right here, whenever it took a knockout, it drew an extra prize card. There was the Groudon, the Mega Groudon EX, and that Ancient Trait said it couldn't be affected by your opponent's trainer cards, or it was trainer cards. You couldn't like boss up or Lysander up the Groudon, Mega Groudon EX from the bench. Might have been, yeah, I think it was trainer cards. Yeah, I think it was trainer cards. It might have been supporter cards. I actually don't fully remember. I don't remember what the labels were like back then. But Ancient Traits were super sick. It was like a little bit extra that you could add to some cards to make them a little bit more powerful and add a lot more depth to the game in certain situations. So I was a huge fan of Ancient Traits. I wish Ancient Traits had stuck around. Kind of sad. I thought Terra would kind of be the revival, the terrestrialization attribute that we're seeing on some cards. I thought Terra would be the resurrection of Ancient Traits, but instead it's just like that one bench protection thing, which is not as cool, man. Another one I'm gonna add to the S tier here is Legend Pokemon. Legend Pokemon were really, really cool because it was really hard to get them into play, but once you did, they had a super powerful effect in their attacks, their HP, but they were worth 2 prize cards, and you definitely felt that effect with them when they got KO'd, because back then it was more of a kind of like a 1 prize format. There was some 2 prize Pokemon in the format, but not a whole ton, and Legend Pokemon were the main 2 prize Pokemon, and they're really, really cool because once you got them out there and you got them into play, you could do a lot with them. You could take a lot of prize cards, do a lot of damage, whatever, but once they got knocked down, your opponent got those 2 prize cards back. You really felt that effect. So yeah, huge fan of Legend Pokemon. I really felt like you felt the power of them when they entered the field, and then you also felt the drawback of them once they got KO'd. And that's like kind of the feeling I'm going with some of these cards. You feel the power of the card when you're using it, but you feel kind of that drawback once they get KO'd or your opponent responds with their own powerful card. So big fan of Legend Pokemon. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and throw Level X's up here as well. Level X is kind of similar to Break Pokemon. One thing I didn't mention with Break Pokemon is when you evolve your, let's take Zoroark, your stage 1 Zoroark into the Zoroark Break, you can use all the effects. You gain the extra HP from the Zoroark Break. You can use all the effects and the attacks of Zoroark Break, but you can still use all the previous stage 1 effects and attacks and stuff from the previous Zoroark. Not just the break card, you can use all this stuff on the Zoroark as well. Same thing with Level X's. You'd had to be in the active to evolve to a Level X. I forget if break Pokemon were the same. I forget if you could evolve breaks on the bench or if you had to be in the active. I completely forget on that. But Level X's, you had to be in the active. So really popular one, the Gardevoir Level X, you had to have your stage 2 Gardevoir in the active. And if it's in the active, you can then, if you've waited for a turn, you can then evolve it to the Level X, and now you have all that extra stuff to work with. Your HP increases, you can use the attack and the ability or Pokemon Power back in the day on the Gardevoir Level X, but you can still use all of the other stuff on the Gardevoir as well. That Gardevoir had a Poke Power and an attack as well that you could also utilize. So you just gained a bunch of stuff to extra to like work with and utilize. It didn't make your Pokemon increase by an extra prize card, but it did count as one of your Gardevoirs. So you couldn't play 4 stage 2 Gardevoir and a Gardevoir Level X. You could play 3 stage 2 Gardevoir and a Gardevoir Level X, or a 2-2 line, but no one ever did that because you only ever need like the 1 Gardevoir Level X to work with. But we saw like in the SP decks, you would like run 2 Garchomp SP, the basic, and then 2 Garchomp Level X, but you couldn't run like 4 Garchomp and 4 Garchomp Level X. You were limited. So it's like another limiting factor around the Level X Pokemon that I think synergized us really well with how powerful the cards were, but limiting them to just kind of usually that one of was pretty cool. Team Magma, Team Aqua, pretty lame. Delta Species, I'm not sure how I feel about Delta Species and Dark Pokemon. These ones, 2004 Dark Pokemon, because they are dual type Pokemon, but there's also this dual type thing here. So I'm actually a big fan of dual types. So I'm going to put dual types up here in B, Delta Species and Dark Pokemon. I don't know how I feel about these because they're, once again, it's kind of just like a label given to the Pokemon, but they are dual types as well. So I'm gonna say dual types are cool, including Delta Species and Dark Pokemon, but I'm gonna go and put the Delta Species and the Dark Pokemon in D tier, along with all the just kind of labeled cards, like additional label. Team Aqua, Team Magma, once again, going to that D tier. These Team Aqua and Team Magma Pokemon also had dual types, which was kind of cool. I believe they did anyways. I think the Groudon is literally fighting and Dark type. Baby Pokemon, those are annoying. I hate the baby Pokemon. I've never been a big fan of the baby Pokemon mechanic. I think they're trash. Falling asleep, not being able to be attacked is just cringe. Imprisoned Shockwave marker Pokemon, also gonna go in the D tier. That was a really weird couple cards where they had like this like special Shockwave marker you could put on Pokemon and would shut off their powers or abilities or something like that. I completely forget what the Shockwave marker Pokemon were like. Held items Pokemon. This I'm putting up an S alongside Ancient Traits. Once again, it's like a little thing. So held items is similar to Ancient Traits, where it was like some Pokemon would have like a held item, so an extra attribute on the card, and it would be like you can evolve faster, or it has free retreat if you meet a certain requirement. I don't remember all of them. There wasn't many of them, but it was very similar to Ancient Traits, where it's like these little extra things that were added to the Pokemon to make them that much more in depth. I guess held items Pokemon were definitely the little bit extra. Ancient Traits were pretty powerful effects on the cards, to be honest, if I'm being honest. But held items, like that little bit extra, just makes the card feel that much more in depth and just feels that much better. So big fan of the held item cards. Big fan of held items. I'm gonna put them up in S here alongside the Ancient Traits. Didn't add a whole ton to the cards, but those little things that it did add, I feel like just add that much more depth to the game. Those are the things I love to see in the Pokemon TCG. Shining Pokemon. I mean, they're similar to the Star Radiant Pokemon, Prism Star Pokemon. You can only play one of them in your deck, I believe. Once again, I didn't play back then, so I'm actually not sure on Shining Pokemon. Star Pokemon, I know you could only play one of. Shining Pokemon, I want to say you could only play one Shining Pokemon in your deck. So once again, I didn't play back then, so I didn't know if Shining Pokemon felt as powerful as like Radiant Pokemon or Prism Star Pokemon. I think Star Pokemon were pretty powerful back in the day, or Ace-Specs as well. So as long as they were on that kind of same power level, and it was like that one of card that you can play of that has that powerful impact, definitely feel like it still belongs in the A tier alongside the rest of them. Prime Pokemon, meh. I mean, I liked the overall Prime formats, but I mean, it didn't really add that much. Definitely not a D tier. Prime Pokemon were pretty cool. Once again, pretty powerful cards. Definitely not a D tier, but I don't think it's going to get much above the C here. Rockets Pokemon, once again, feels just kind of like a label given to cards to make cards interact with certain cards. That's a D tier. Hollands. Hollands was pretty dope. There's a whole kind of Hollands engine built around cards. It is similar to just kind of having a label where cards are just kind of working around it. But the Hollands stuff was pretty cool. Like Hollands Transceiver or Hollands Receiver or something that acted as a Via Seeker and a supporter search card for your deck. Like, it's pretty bonkers. I'm gonna go ahead and give Hollands the C tier here. And then the last we have V-Unions. I actually really like V-Unions. I think V-Unions are really, really dope. I think the idea behind them is really, really cool. Overall, as a mechanic, I think it's really dope. I think the actual cards we got, the V-Unions we actually got, just weren't quite competitive, obviously, but they were still cool cards. Mewtwo V-Union, of course, is like the one really competitive V-Union that we got. The other ones like the Pikachu, the Morpeko, there's just another one out. The Greninja was like close. I think Greninja was really close to being potentially good in competitive play. Not quite. It was a little bit too far off. They're really hard to set up. They're really cool when you do set them up. You can do some cool combos. Not really competitive, but I think a really cool mechanic nonetheless. I'm gonna take a quick look over my list here, see if I want to change anything. I don't think I do. I think I like where everything is at. I'm gonna go ahead and lock this in. So my tier list for Pokemon TCG mechanics throughout the years. I don't know how far back this goes. I guess it pretty much goes all the way back to 2000, right? I guess a lot of old cards in here. Like I said, I don't have quite a super strong opinion on some of these cards. I didn't play with all of them, stuff like the Delta Species and the Dark Pokemon. I'd maybe look at those a little bit differently had I actually played back then. So let me know in the comment section if you played with some of these older cards. What do you think about where I put some of them? And what do you think about my list in general? Do you like that I have tag teams up here in A tier? Or should they belong in D, where I feel like most people would put tag teams? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.